I just wondered if we could hunt a while on your place. The old man sitting there about 75 years old, tobacco running down his mouth. He said, spit. He said, what's your name? He said, my name is Wood. He said, are you any relation to old man Jim that used to live? He said, yeah, I'm Jim's boy. He said, I'm Banks Jim. Well, they said old man Jim was an honest man. He said, certainly, help yourself. He said, are you by yourself? He said, no, my pastor is out there. He said, what? He said, my pastor is out in a car, said he's hunting with me. He said, Wood, you don't mean you've got so low down till you have to tote a preacher with you wherever you go. So he's a rough old character. So I thought I'd bring you out of the car, you know. So I got out and walked around, and he said, well, and you're a preacher, huh? I said, yes, sir. He looked me up and down, squirrel, blood, and dirt. He said, I said, it don't look much like it. He said, well, I kind of like that. He said, you know, I want to tell you something. He said, I'm supposed to be an infidel. I said, yes, sir, I understood that. I said, I don't think it's much to brag about, do you? He said, well, he said, I don't know. He said, I'm going to tell you what I think of you guys. I said, all right. He said, you're barking up the wrong tree. And how many knows what that means? See? It means it's a lying dog, you see. The coon's not up there at all, see. He said, you're barking up the wrong tree. No, I said, that's to opinion. And he said, well, he said, look, you see that old chimney stand up there? Yes, I was born up there 75 years ago. And said, I've lived right here in these hills all around here all these years. And said, I've looked towards the skies, I've looked here and there. And surely in all these 75 years, I would have seen something that looked like God. Didn't you think so? I said, well, it depends on what you're looking at here, what you're looking for. He said, well, he said, I certainly don't believe there is such a creature, and I believe you fellows just simply get out and swindle the people out of their money and everything, and that's the way it goes. I said, well, you're an American citizen. You have a right to your own thinking. He said, there's one guy one time that I heard of. He said that I would if he ever get to talk with that fellow, said I'd like to ask him a few questions. I said, yes, sir. He said it was a preacher, you might know him. Said he had a meeting up here in Campbellsville not long ago in a churchyard up there, a campground. And he said, I forget his name. Said he's from Indiana. And I said, oh, yes, sir. Don't say that. And so he said, I said, what about him? He said, well, he said, old lady somebody up there on the hill said, you know, she was dying with cancer. And said, wife and I would go up there of a morning to change her bed. Said they couldn't even raise her up high enough to put her on the bedpan. Said they just had to pull a draw sheet. And said she was dying. She'd been to Louisville and said the doctors had give her up and said she was going to die. And her sister went up that meeting and said that preacher was standing up on a platform, looked back over the audience and called this woman by name and told her when she left she took a handkerchief and put it in her purse and called this woman's name down here 20 miles below here, said how she was suffering with cancer, what her name was and all she'd been through, said take that handkerchief and go lay it on the woman and said the woman will be healed of her cancer. And said they come down here that night and said, honest, I heard the office screaming up there. I thought they had the Salvation Army turned loose on top of the hill up there. Said, well, I said, I guess old sister's dead. Said, tomorrow we'll go and get the wagon, how we take her out till you get to the main road. And said, so they can take her to the undertaker. And said that we waited, no need to go up that time of night. Said, it's about a mile up on the hill here. Said, we went up there the next morning, and you know what happened? I said, no, sir. He said, she was sitting there eating fried apple pies and drinking coffee with her husband. I said, you mean that? He said, yes, sir. Oh, I said, now, mister, you really don't mean that. He said, what bothers me is how did that man and never in this country and knew that? And I said, oh, you don't believe it. He said, it's the truth. I said, you believe that? See, he said, well, go right up there on the hill. I can prove it to you. He's preaching back to me now. So I said, I picked up an apple and I said, can I have one of these apples? I rubbed it on my clothes. He said, well, the yellow jackets are eating them up. I guess you can have one. And I said, I bit into it. I said, that's a nice apple. He said, oh, yes. I said, you know what? I planted that tree there. 40 years ago or something like that. I said, oh, is that right? Yes, sir. And I said, well, and every year, I said, I noticed we haven't had no frost yet. It's early August. And I said, them leaves are falling off the trees. Yes, sir. That's right. It's coming on fall. We were going to have an early one this time. I said, yes, sir. Change the subject. See, and he said, I said, well, you know, it's strange. I said, how that sap goes out of that tree. I said, and them leaves falls off. And yet there's no, they haven't had no frost to kill the leaves. And he said, well, he said, what's that got to do with what we're talking about? And I said, well, I just wondered, you know, Mama always said give a cow enough rope and it'll hang itself, you know, so I just given him plenty of rope. So he went on out and he said, well, yes, what's that got to do with it? I said, you know, God brings them apples up. You enjoy those apples, leaves, he said, in the shade and so forth. It goes down in the fall of the year. I said, comes back up again with the apples and with the leaves again. And he said, oh, that's just nature. See, that's just nature. I said, well, of course that's nature. I said, that's nature, but somebody has to control nature. See? He said, you tell me now, what does that? He said, well, it's just naturally nature. I said, who is it that says to that little leaf now? And I said, now, the reason that leaf falls off is because the sap goes down into the root. And what if that sap stayed up in the tree through the wintertime? What would happen? It said it would kill the tree. Well, I said, now, what intelligence that runs that sap down into the roots says, get out of here now, it's coming fall of the year, get down into the roots and hide, and stay down into the roots like a grave, and then next spring comes back up again, brings up more apples and brings up more leaves and things. He said, that's just nature, it'll do it. Said, the weather, the changing, you know, coming on fall. I said, set a bucket of water on the post out there and see if nature runs it down the bottom of the post and brings it back up again. Well, he said, you might have something. I said, think of it while we go hunting. And he said, well, he said, hunt where you want to. And I said, when I come back, if you'll tell me what intelligence runs that sap out of that tree down into the roots to stay all winter and come back the next winter, I'll tell you that's the same intelligence that told me about that woman up there. Said, told you? I said, yes, sir. He said, you're not that preacher. I said, would you know his name? He said, yes. I said, Branham. He said, that's him. I said, that's right. And you know what? I led the old man to Christ right there on his own testimony. And a year later, I was down there and pulled a car, Indiana license on, in the yard. They'd moved away. He had died. And so when I come back, there stood his wife to really break me over. I thought I had permission to hunt. And she come out there. She said, can't you read? I said, yes, ma'am. She said, did you see those signs saying no hunting? I said, yes, ma'am. But I said, I have permission. You do not have permission, she said. And said, we've got this place posted for many years. I said, well, sister, I was wrong, and I'm sorry. He said, sorry nothing. Them Indiana license on there and set up here. You're the boldest people. I said, could I just explain it? I said, she said, who gave you permission? I said, I don't know. I said it was an elderly man sitting out there on the porch. When I was down here last year, we was talking about God, see? And she said, are you Brother Branham? And I said, yes, ma'am. She said, forgive me. I didn't know who you were. She said, I want to tell you his testimony. In his last dying hours, he raised up his hands and praised God. Said he died in Christian faith and was carried away to God. See, if they hold their peace, the rocks will immediately cry out. There's something in nature. Watch the birds, watch the animals, watch everything, and you watch nature. Watch the little dove, how he flies, what a different bird he is. See, he doesn't have any gall. He can't eat like the crow can. He has no gall in him. He doesn't have to take a bath in the water because he's got something on the inside of him. It cleans him from the inside out, you see.